Please be seated. One evening when I was 15 years old, I walked into a small country Methodist church. I wasn't that familiar with the church, although I had been in there the previous 2 evenings. But this was different. I walked in and I looked around and I surveyed things, and then I sat down. I came in, we started the service, and we sang all the hymns, and then someone stood up, and after a very brief introduction, I walked up behind the pulpit. I proceeded to preach my first sermon. It was a small little congregation, small church, and when I looked out, what was a small building had become a huge concert hall. And what was seemingly a handful of people was a mass like I had never seen before. My first lesson: don't look up. I had my notes in front of me on the pulpit, note cards. I had them in order. And no, I didn't knock them everywhere. They stayed where they needed to, and I flipped through them. I remember so much about that evening. I remember the sheer terror of looking out and just hoping that someone would listen or not. By the way, there's an element of that fear that never goes away. And that's a good thing. I remember that evening that I preached my first sermon on love. What would you expect? I talked about the 3 Greek words and understanding for love: agape and philios and eros. I don't know how long it lasted, maybe 2.5, 3 minutes, I don't know. 3 hours, I don't know. But I'm aware when I think back on that service, what strikes me the most was not the terror, not the huge number of people in this massive auditorium that were there to hear me. What strikes me is that I knew so much about love. At 15, I somehow seemed to know so much about love. Enough that I could stand up in front of this group and preach this sermon about it. Now, I have to admit that in the 45 years since then, and yes, I know I don't look it. And if it were not for these silver highlights that I have put in my hair, but in the 45 years since that time, I've come to realize that I may not know as much about love as I thought I did then. Jesus gathered his disciples in that upper room. They had had a taste of what had happened to this time, the Monday through Wednesday, or Sunday through Wednesday of Holy Week. And here they were gathered on Thursday evening the institution of the Eucharist. And Jesus is talking to them about what? He's talking to them about love. You know, if you were to distill everything that Jesus had to say in the Gospel down to one sentence, I truly believe that one sentence would be, it's all about love. Now, I would imagine that as they sat in that room, these disciples who had been with him for this amount of time, they had been with him everywhere that he had gone. And shortly after this, a few of them would go to Gethsemane with him, where he would pray. These guys who knew him had been with him when he said, you need to love. I'm sure in their minds they knew about love. I'm sure in their minds they were going, oh, we've loved you all along. And we know you've loved us. Kind of a 15-year-old understanding of love. But you know, I think that what happened for them was something was set in motion on that evening. And that for the rest of their lives and for the 2,000 years since then, they and the church have been trying to come to some understanding of love. And I don't think we're there yet. For you see, what was going to happen to them is they were going to have that evening, and then the next morning they were going to watch as he would be sentenced to death. And then they would stand by and watch as he bore his cross to Golgotha. And then a few of them, a very few of them, would look up at him, and they would finally begin to get it. That's love. That's love. When you're 15, love seems so simple. And the older you get, the more elusive it seems, and the lack of our understanding we bring. If you love, that's what's important. It's all about love. Now, I've come to see that part of the difficulty of loving, the part of the difficulty of doing what I need to do is that as much as I want to, I don't want to. Because, you know, love really didn't begin to have true meaning to me or for me until I began to experience deep loss. And it's only when we love in the presence of losing, I think, that we truly know what love is. It's a decision. It's a decision that we make day in and day out. And at one level, love is simply about saying yes to someone over and over and over again. Well, mostly. There are days in there when it's all about maybes, isn't it? But when you get down to it, it's all about love. Our presiding bishop has an absolutely wonderful way of presenting this. He says, if it's about love, it's about God. And if it's about God, it's about love. And if it's not about love, it's not about God. It's all about love. Now, what I've come to experience is this. I don't know a lot about it, but I know this. It doesn't happen because I have an action plan for how it's going to happen. And it doesn't happen simply because I have a good feeling about somebody, even though, thank God, we have those feelings, or you and I would probably never get married. That's what kind of gets us together in our marriages. But it happens because every day I say yes. And it happens because every day I take down the barrier inside myself that pushes against me being vulnerable with anyone. And I say, here I am. I say it to you who I love. I say it to God who I love. And I strive every day to say it in some way to those around me who I may not even know. You see, it's not about what I know. It's about what I'm going to do and how I'm going to respond to love. And that's what it's all about.